book of Proverbs. Go to chapter 1. In full disclosure, there's a team of us who are going to Guatemala in just a few months, and we have a training today in Princeton at noon. So I typically end around 11:45. I'm going to pretty much aim for that today so that we can get over there. Potluck is today. You can stick around as long as you want. If I come in tomorrow when you're still in the building, that's fine. Just please wrap up any food that you might have. Proverbs chapter 1. This mic feels a little quiet. Can I go a hair more? How's it all? How are we doing today, church? Throw a smile this way. Good. I want to lay a foundation this morning for a study that I want to do on the book of Proverbs. The book of Proverbs, it's among the most beloved, it's among the most beneficial works in the whole of Scripture. How many think that Proverbs is in your top 5 favorite books? Bubba, I know that you like the book of Proverbs. Anybody else, you just tend to fall into the book of Proverbs? Full disclosure, I'm the opposite. It is my least favorite to read just on my own. Because the book, in so many ways, it does not have a flow where every verse leads to the next. It's a compilation of wise sayings, which for someone with my brain makes it a little bit overwhelming at times. But I want to spend some time this morning considering, why is this book in the Bible? How did it get there? Who wrote it? And what can we benefit from it? You're in chapter 1, right? Beautiful. I want to look at verses 1 through 6, and again, today is just laying the foundation for some very specific things that I want to get into in the weeks ahead. We're going to take a look at the book of Proverbs through kind of a unique filter, if you will. Verse 1, are you there? Beautiful. If you're not there, I hope it's memorized. The Proverbs of Solomon, son of David, king of Israel. Now keep in mind, at this time it was a unified kingdom. There was no separate Israel and Judah. It was one unified kingdom. Unified under the father David, but now in Solomon. It's really entering into an apex or a golden age. For gaining wisdom and instruction, for understanding words of insight, for receiving instruction in prudent or in wise behavior, doing what is right and just and fair, for giving prudence to those who are what? How many of us in the sound of my voice, you'll admit my hands are up, simple people? God, teach us, offering knowledge and discretion to the young. Let the wise listen and add to their learning, and let the discerning, let those who already possess a modicum of wisdom get guidance. For understanding proverbs and parables, the sayings and the riddles of the wise. And I want to stop there, because those opening 6 verses set the tone and the bedrock foundation for all that's going to come in the remainder of the work. I want to begin looking at the topic of authorship. Does anybody want to venture a guess as to who put the book of Proverbs together? Spoiler alert, it's in verse 1. Solomon. What do we know about Solomon? What are some things that we know to be true about him? We know he was the son of what figure? Pretty important. Is David a significant biblical character? Absolutely. Take your time in your own time to read through 1st and 2nd Samuel, on into Chronicles, Kings, and you'll see David as a seminal figure. We know that Solomon, like his father before him, was the king over a unified Israel. Now, when you think of Solomon, what trait do we typically associate with him? And please don't say idolatry. That was the latter aspect of his life, which we are going to cover, likely, Lord willing, in the next series. But what do we associate with Solomon? Wisdom. How did Solomon come to be blessed with such wisdom? I want you to keep your thumb in Proverbs, but I want you to go to 1 Kings chapter 3. Because I want you to just see some of these things that are true about the author who put this book together. Now, this is in my notes, but it's beyond our time this morning. Solomon included or incorporated the writings and sayings of other wise men, dare I say wise guys, into his book. So the book of Proverbs is primarily Solomon, but he had the wisdom to realize he didn't know it all and that other people were also blessed with wisdom. And he brought some of their writings into the whole of his works. That's a side note. That's just the nerd in me that likes Bible history and beyond. Are you in 1 Kings chapter 3 yet? Beautiful. Praise the Lord. Verse 5. Now we're answering the question, how did Solomon come to be associated with wisdom? Here's where it starts, at Gibeon. The Lord appeared to Solomon during the night in a dream. And God said, ask for whatever you want me to give to you. All eyes this way. The Lord appears to you tonight willing to sign the blank check of you can ask whatever you desire. What do you ask for? Don't answer out loud, but I want you to begin to put yourself in Solomon's shoes. David is gone. Solomon is the new king. And he has divine sanction from God himself. Ask of me what you desire. What can I do for you, son? And look at his answer. Solomon answered, verse 6, you have shown great kindness to your servant, my father David, because he was faithful to you and righteous and upright in heart. You've continued this great kindness to him and have given him a son to sit on his throne this very day, referring to himself. Now, Lord my God, you have made your servant king in the place of my father David, but I am only a little child. And I don't know how to carry out, I don't know how to execute my duties. Your servant is here among the people you have chosen, a great people, too numerous to count or number. Therefore, so give your servant what? A discerning heart, to govern your people and to distinguish, to discern, if you will, between right and wrong. For who is able to govern this great people of yours? All eyes this way. That is the hallmark of someone who has the capacity of being an amazing leader. Because what you see here is humility. You see perspective, that they are sitting on a throne that God had assigned to him. You see the recognition of need, that God, I am limited. There's only so much that I bring to the table. And apart from you, I'm going to be woefully and sorely lacking, because who can be expected to lead this great people of yours? Can I mess with you a little bit? Thank you, Rick. Rick says it's okay for me to mess with you a little bit. I'm going to anyway. I have the microphone. I know many people, not everyone. This is not a blanket statement. I know everyone is excited of the new golden age of Trump. I call it the orange age. I would like to see a little more humility in our leaders. It's popular. I'd like to see a little more of this. Across the board. Pulpits, leaders, rulers. God, without you, we can do precisely nothing. Solomon has the opportunity to ask big and ask large, and oh man, the kid hits a home run. And look at what it says in verse 10. The Lord was pleased. How many of you want to please the Lord? Well, smarten up in what you ask for. I have a daughter. If you don't know that, I say it all the time. Sometimes she asks me for things, and oh, I'm not pleased. After she finishes a brownie the size of my head, Daddy, can I have more chocolate? And as she continues to grow, that's probably only going to amplify in its own ways. We are all cosmic kids before the Lord. And sometimes we just ask amiss. I want to be in a place like Solomon that when I ask, it puts a smile on the old man's face, to speak a little casually. God was pleased that Solomon had asked for this. So God said to him, since you have asked for this, and not for long life or wealth or for yourself, nor asked for the death of your enemies, but for discernment and administering justice, I will do what you have asked. I will give you, you see, it's a gift. I will give you a wise and discerning heart, so that there will never be anyone like you, nor will there ever be. Never have been anyone like you. Moreover, on top of this, I will give you what you've not asked for. Isn't that cool that if you ask the Lord rightly with the right heart, he throws in a little extra? You didn't ask for wealth and honor. I'm going to give it to you so that in your lifetime you will have no equal among kings. And if you walk in obedience to me and keep my decrees and commands as David your father did, I will give you long life. And Solomon awoke, and he realized that it had been a dream. He returned to Jerusalem, stood before the ark of the Lord's covenant, and sacrificed burnt offerings and fellowship offerings. And then he gave a feast, celebratory for what God has done for all of his court. Now, if you keep reading in 1 Kings chapter 3, you immediately begin to see King Solomon traffic in wisdom. We're all familiar with the story. 2 women come before him. One baby dead, one baby alive, and both mothers saying it's theirs. And we see Solomon operating in wisdom judiciously and amazingly solving that case. Even 1 Kings chapter 3, correct? Go to chapter 4. And what we see in chapter 4 is a bit of a summation regarding the wisdom of Solomon. Way down into verse 29. 1 Kings 4:29. It says, God gave Solomon wisdom and very great insight and a breadth of understanding as measureless as the sand on the seashore. His wisdom was greater than the wisdom of all the people of the East and greater than all the wisdom of Egypt. All the famed people who were known for their capacities, Solomon was wiser than them. Verse 31, he was wiser than the following list of people: Ethan the Ezraite, wiser than Heman, Calcol, Darda, the sons of Mahal. Does anybody know who any of those people are? When's the last time you read the musings of Ethan the Ezraite? These were famed people, notable and known. The author is name-dropping here. But how many have heard of Solomon before and his wisdom? That's a testimony to this. His fame spread to the surrounding nations. Verse 32, he spoke, help the pastor out, 3,000 proverbs. That's a lot. And his songs numbered 1,005. Now, I love the remainder of this text because we often will posit a division between matters of faith and matters of science. But look at verse 33. He spoke about plant life, from the cedar of Lebanon to the hyssop that grows out of the walls. He spoke about animals and birds and reptiles and fish. I don't think God's people have to be dumb. I don't think we have to artificially divide ourselves from the academics. Are there disagreements? Sure. But can't we speak to things in their realm? From all nations, people came to listen to his wisdom, sent by the kings, all the kings of the world who had heard of his wisdom. It's a beautiful thing that Solomon, we see a man trafficking in wisdom. And this man who was so blessed with wisdom took the time to compile for us by the Spirit the book of Proverbs. That's what Proverbs chapter 1, let's turn back there, says. He put this book together that we who are the students, the audience, the readers, and the hearers might grow in, gain in, develop in, be cultivated in wisdom, that we might live prudently before the Lord. $1 million question. You ready? All eyes this way. In light of everything I just said, what is wisdom? He's writing a book seeking to impart wisdom so that we might walk in wisdom. But what is wisdom? Chew on that for a second. Someone is asking you, how do you respond? Generally speaking, wisdom is defined simply as insight or understanding. That's the macro level. Insight or understanding. But biblical wisdom is insight or understanding into two key or critical arenas. Number one, it's understanding the nature and the workings of the Lord. It's understanding what God is like and what he expects of those who are his. God has character, you know. There are attributes of who and what he is that we have to wisely navigate in this life if we're going to walk well. Is God love? Which means that we're going to have to learn to walk in love, correct? But God is also just, which means we're going to have to learn to walk in justice. God is also holy, which means we're going to have to learn to walk in holiness. Every aspect and attribute of God has to find some practical manifestation in how we live. It's understanding who and what he is, number one. And number two, how that finds application here, in the here and now. The book of Proverbs is a tremendously spiritual yet deeply practical book. That's why I think many people tend to enjoy it, is they can kind of just learn how to live this thing. What to do, what not to do, what to say, what not to say, when to go forth, when to pull back. That is all the aspect of this thing called wisdom. I have about 5 minutes left, maybe 7. This is the question I want to introduce today that we're going to spend the next couple of weeks looking specifically at. We know that Solomon was wise. He ended up as a wise guy, but he began with wisdom. We know that he desires to impart wisdom to those who are his readers and hearers. That's us. But how does he impart it? In the book of Proverbs, what steps does Solomon take to express wisdom there that you might receive it and walk in it? I'm going to give you 3 things quickly. Are you ready? Teacher hat is on. Number 1, are you ready for the depths of this? In the book of Proverbs, Solomon gives a lot of proverbs. You can write that down. Solomon worked to convey wisdom through the use and the utilization of something called a proverb. The book of Proverbs from chapter 10 on, that's where it starts in some ways regarding this topic. It is a compilation, a compendium of individual proverbs, truisms, and adages that are meant to convey insight on an incredible number of topics. I tried to write down in my notes the number of topics the book of Proverbs gets into. I gave up. There's just way too many. The reader from chapter 10 on is faced with a myriad of short, simple statements meant to express truth. And let me just say before I move on that the writers, the authors, and the teachers of the ancient East and Far East, they loved Proverbs. You read the ministry of Jesus, it abounds with Proverbs, one-line statements. And I think for a number of reasons. Number 1 is it communicates a tremendous amount of information in a short amount of time. Number 2, they're memorable. This is an audience that many did not read. They had to learn and memorize and commit it to an oral teaching. So to hear something once and you can retain it, that's a pretty cool form of communication. We do use proverbs in our own culture. Who's ever heard the following? The early bird gets the... That is a proverb that stresses the need for industry in maximizing opportunity. A penny saved, it's a penny earned. It speaks to the need for saving and frugality. Look before you. It stresses caution in the making of decisions. I Googled, isn't Google a wonderful tool? I Googled, this is my form of typing, or this really, most famous proverbs in the book of Proverbs, and it shot a laundry list at me. I'm going to read a few of them to you. Is that okay? Excellent. Bubba, I thought of you with this one because you like this one. Are you ready? Proverbs 12, verse 1. Whoever loves discipline loves knowledge, but whoever hates correction is stupid. That's a whole sermon. Gang, that one line has so many applications. Don't be stupid. I'm going to begin a ministry of just smacking sense into people. I'm starting with you, Sean Barry. You laugh like that again. Let me give you a couple more. Walk with the wise and become wise, for a companion of fools suffers harm. Ooh, that warns us, be careful who your closest associates are, because you will become like them. My grandfather, never met the man. He'd passed the year I was born right before. But he had a line, if you want to be smart, hang out with people that are smarter than you. He was quoting Proverbs, didn't even know it. Not even a godly man, but turns out God's wisdom is true. There's a way that appears to be right, but in the end it leads to death. So many people are so sincere and so sure they're doing the right thing, but you can be so sincerely wrong. Righteousness exalts a nation, but sin condemns any people. These are just famous ones. The tongue is the power of what? Life and death. And those who love it will eat its fruit. You want to get yourself into trouble? Keep talking. You'll eat the fruit of it, what this thing produces. Better to live on the corner of a roof. I shouldn't finish this one, but I will. Than share a house with a quarrelsome wife. However, to bail myself out, charm is deceptive and beauty is fleeting, but a woman who fears the Lord is to be praised. See, these are just all individual proverbs. That's the primary mechanism by which and through which Solomon communicates wisdom to us. Number two is one that we don't often think about, and I'm running low on time, but in the early chapters 1 through 9, he adopts what I will call a fatherly tone. He addresses the reader or the hearer as though he were a father speaking to beloved children. He's not operating in condescension or speaking down to us. Rather, he's using a technique that is meant to arrest our attention, soften our hearts, and put us in a place whereby we are to receive and learn and grow. I'm going to feed you with a fire hose. We're going to go fast. Go to Proverbs 1 and try to keep up. Are you ready? Verse 8. Listen, help the pastor out, my son. Let me just say this applies to women as well. But listen, my child, my son, to your father's instruction. Verse 10, my son, if sinful men entice you, don't give in to them. Go over to chapter 2. I'm going to give you a quick survey. Chapter 2, verse 1, my son, if you accept my words. Chapter 3, verse 1, my son, don't forget my teaching, but keep my commands in your heart. Same chapter, verse 11. My son, don't despise the Lord's discipline and don't resent his rebuke. Verse 21, are you seeing the pattern yet? My son, don't let wisdom and understanding out of your sight. Preserve sound judgment and discretion. Chapter 4, verse 1. Listen, my son, to a father's instruction. Pay attention. Gain understanding. Verse 10, listen, my son. Accept what I say, that the years of your life may be many. Same chapter, chapter 4, verse 20. My son, pay attention to what I say and turn your ear to my words. I'm almost done. Chapter 5, verse 1. I'm being thorough for a reason. My son, pay attention to my wisdom and turn your ear to my words of insight. Verse 7, same chapter. Now then, my sons, listen to me. Don't turn aside from what I say. Chapter 6, all the way down at verse 20. My son, keep your father's commands and don't forsake your mother's teaching. Almost done. Chapter 7, verse 1. My son, keep my words and store up my commands within you. And finally, verse 24, now then, my sons, listen to me. All eyes this way. Ever noticed that before? How often that appears in those early chapters? What does that do to our hearts when we hear it? It draws us in, softens us. It reminds us of the days when we had fathers, and if we have fathers, and they would pull us aside and try to offer some instruction with the fullness of their heart. How often I take my little one and I look in her face and say, listen to Daddy. You need to hear this. You need to remember this. You need to consider this. I'm trying to make an imprint on the wet cement of your heart. That's what Solomon is doing to us. In the Lord, by the Spirit, he's taking each of us by the face saying, listen to me. You can hear his heart in it. It's a beautiful thing. And when you read these chapters, it sets the tone for the whole of the book. The entire book is meant to be a communication to you from a father to a child. It's a beautiful thing. Number 3, I have to end with this. This is going to set the stage for next Sunday. This is really the whole of the series I want to get into. He communicates and imparts wisdom by proverb, by speaking from a fatherly role, and number 3, this beautiful thing called personification. We're going back to middle school, teacher Cheryl. Personification. Now, that's not a word you use a whole lot. I get it. It's something you learn in school and tend to forget, which is tragic, because the Bible uses personification a lot. Personification simply is attributing a personal nature or human characteristics to something non-human. For homework, you ready? I want you to read chapters 1 through 9. Looking specifically for this thing called personification. And what I mean by that is, as you read those chapters, you're going to see wisdom personified as a woman. Lady Wisdom, we'll call her. At the same time, you'll also read of a figure named Folly. Lady Folly, often called the sinful woman, the wayward woman, or the adulterous woman. Why a woman? For both? Well, much like Spanish and other language, Hebrew is a gendered language. Wisdom in ancient Hebrew is in the feminine. So the author personifies wisdom and sinfulness both as women. We're going to spend some time in this series starting next week looking at Lady Wisdom, Lady Folly, or the adulterous woman. We're going to be looking at the wise. The wise it's a character that appears all the way through the book. We're going to talk about the simple. We're going to talk about the fool. See, all these characters, they're abstractions of grander topics. And in some ways, the worst of them all, the mocker. The mocker or the scoffer. We have a lot to get through. So what's your homework? Read 1 through 9. Read it with your kids. There's a crazy thought. Open the Bible up, and I want you to look for these things. In particular, for next week and the week after, look for Lady Wisdom and Lady Folly. They permeate those early chapters. And as you read about them, look at what they bring to the table regarding God's wisdom and or the rejection of it. There's a lot in there, and we're going to begin to break it down.